Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Weekly Wake Up. As you know, this is our opportunity, our live stream for BVSD employees, in which we like to connect leadership and different topics to employees so that you can ask your questions and be able to deep dive into things. It has been 2 weeks since the tragedy at the King Soopers in Boulder, and while a lot of things have returned to normal, including our students returning back to our buildings, we know that many of our staff members, kids, and families are still struggling with the impacts of this very traumatic event. That's why we have an amazing trauma team. The BVSD Trauma Team is actually joining us this morning, and I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves to share a little bit about their outstanding work and to give us some pointers in regards to what we should be doing with kids in our classrooms and taking care of ourselves. Before I do that, I do want to mention real quick, we still have our Boulder Strong effort that we're doing. In fact, we have these posters that you can put up in your school, and I'll show you that in a second. But I did want to get straight to the question. If you've got a question today, you can just send it via bit.ly. That's bit.ly/BVSD We'll be taking questions from employees throughout the entirety of the show. So I do want to encourage everybody to sort of do that. I'll stop presenting. I'll just mention this is what those posters look like. You could just print it out on a normal sheet of paper, and be careful with your custodial staff. Sometimes they want you to use blue tape instead of like Scotch tape because it gets all over the glass. But just to show your support for the victims of the shooting. We just really want to make sure that people are taking care of each other and our students. So let's go ahead and go around and introduce the members of our panel today. Tammy Lawrence is the Director of Student Support Services. Good morning, Tammy.
Good morning, everyone.
We've got Elton Davis, the student engagement, one of our student engagement specialists.
Good morning.
I'm saying these titles as if they're singular, but there are multiple people in some of these roles, so I do want to mention that as well. Amazing team, very amazing team. Jamie Smalley is one of our mental health advocates. Good morning, Jamie.
Good morning.
Yadi Cook is also a mental health advocate. Good morning, Yadi.
Good morning.
And we are lucky enough to. Oh, sorry. What were you saying? Stepped on you. Oh, okay. I got a little bit. I think the internet got stuck there for a second, but we're all right. We're all here. Sarah Weatherly is also joining us from Mental Health Partners. She's a program supervisor. Good morning, Sarah.
Morning. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much all for joining. We were just commenting that this is, it feels awfully early, 7 o'clock in the morning. We always feel that way, but especially after a holiday weekend. So we want to thank everybody. And if you celebrate Passover or Easter, we just want to, wish you the best and hope that that you're coming back to school and work doing okay today. I do want to just go ahead and jump right into with Tammy and talk a little bit about our trauma team. You really act as kind of like first responders when it comes to supporting our students. You guys are on call, for the kinds of things that we're working on right now, these traumatic events. Kind of tell us a little bit about the team.
Well, first I would like to say, it's our community has really come together. So it's been really tremendous in this time of tragedy, how everyone has really worked together to support our entire system and our whole community. So hats off to everyone that has been helping in this space. And even those that are, grieving and hurting are stepping forward to help. And I think we find healing in helping others. And we just have really seen a great outpouring of support in that space. So I just want to start with saying that. Our trauma team is a bit of our first responders. We jump in when things just aren't working the way they're supposed to or something happens. And our team is really a voluntary team made up of school counselors, social workers, psychologists, mental health advocates, prevention interventionists, engagement specialists, and attendance advocates. We've joined this year because they do have a bit of background knowledge in trauma and grief and how we really support our students. And so anytime there's an incident, we've got 3 distinct teams for each of our networks. So we've got 3 teams within each network, and we use them on a rotating basis. So once a team is called out, then we call the next team and put them on call because we never know when these are going to happen. And then we have a team lead and we've got a deputy for each team. And so Katie Romero and Mike Lowe are my counterparts in each network. And so we really have separated them out into networks. This work can be very hard and challenging and heavy at times. And so it's been nice to have some teammates. Back in the day, there was just, Andy Tucker kind of running the ship. And then when I came in, and now we've got a few more hands on deck. So that's helpful. And so what we do every single year is we put out a survey to those that want to volunteer when these tragedies happen. And so a great example is that volunteer piece when this tragedy happened, it was spring break. And we went full networks, all three networks, just to really cast that net large to see who we could get to help in this tragedy. And we were very fortunate that we had the support that we had, and people stepped right in. And immediately the next day, we had 2 members of our team out supporting our students that were on site at Fairview. And then we had our Google Doc that we were rotating through the team members and contacting the families individually. And then we opened up Fairview on Friday for a walk-in and had a large team there to support all of the walk-ins there. So we really, and this I would say is probably the largest response that we've had. That Tuesday following coming back, we had additional layer of support in every single building that is close to King Soopers, in trying to make sure that they had enough hands on deck to help support their students and their teachers and their community if they needed that. So at that time, we had 6 buildings that were covered with additional support, and then 1 other building that we didn't send people in because they didn't have students quite back. So it was a lot. And because our support team is made up of staff members, it was a bit challenging in that because we did not want to pull staff members from other buildings because we weren't sure exactly what the impact was going to be across the district. And so we really used our student support services team, and that would be our attendance advocates, our engagement specialists, and all of our mental health advocates, stepped in on that day. And then what we've done additionally in this event is we've got a point person in every building, and we connected our trauma teams to their building and then used our school counselors as well to help with this. And so we have a point person in every building so we can monitor what the needs are. So it's really kind of just a large scale, depending on whatever the need is, we jump in and support our schools in whatever capacity we need.
And I'm just going to follow up on something that you just said, which is, you and I oftentimes talk about sort of the ripple effect that happens after, and we, I don't know that a lot of people realize too, that obviously there's this big kind of event, but these kind of things happen quite often, where we have a parent death in the community, or, a student that might have been sick for a long time, passes away, or we find out about a former student. We're with 30,000 kids, it's a small city essentially. So these things are happening in our community all the time. And so, I think with something like this, we didn't really know, you just said it, we didn't really know how deep or, exactly where those ripples would hit. I mean, you didn't have to go to a school in that specific area to be in that King Soopers, or to know someone that might have been there, or to watch news coverage and be traumatized by it. I mean, we were hearing from people across the district, right, as this had kind of gone about.
Correct. And I think, trauma hits us all individually very differently. And it can also trigger a past experience for someone. And so we really didn't know what that impact was going to be. And knowing that our community is across, we've got schools in Broomfield, we've got schools in Erie, and we've got schools in Boulder across, but north of town. And we really didn't know what that was going to be as far as what our response was going to be and how we were going to support people. And were they in the school, or were they in the parking lot? Did they have family members there? Even myself, I didn't grow up in Boulder, but my husband did. And so I immediately, contacted my sister-in-law that lives just 2 blocks away from there. So it was just, everybody has their own reaction, and they have their own, community, their home, their family that they respond to. And then you've got your school community. And so we really didn't know what this was going to be, because it didn't happen in one of our buildings, but it happened in our community. And we are at the hub, and it's generational, right? Like, so my mother-in-law that's in her 80s was calling me immediately saying, what is going on? What is going on? And so, even our elderly people are struggling with this because this is where they have shopped for many, many, many years, and so we just really wanted to open it up to anybody that we could help and support in that space.
Elton, I know that you grew up in the Boulder area. I think you said when we were talking to 9 News a couple weeks ago that that your grandmother just lives in a stone's throw from the store. So obviously, similarly to what Tammy was saying, you and your family have direct impacts. But as we opened that center for students over at Fairview, you were definitely seeing members of our community come forward and raise their hand and say, I need help as a student, or parents oftentimes would say, what kind of tips can you give us? What were you guys seeing? What was that like?
Well, yeah, I grew up in Boulder, and my grandmother does live like right across on the other side of Table Mesa. So everything is really, really close for us. And the same thing that was happening with Tammy, the calls that were coming in right away, wanting to make sure everybody was okay and things like that were happening. But what we were getting from the families and everything really covered the gambit of conversations that you could possibly have, whether it was parents that wanted to touch base about how to have these conversations with their child about what happened, or whether it was students that really wanted to just talk through things and say, why here, right? That it really covered a lot, and the experience that we have within the team allowed us to have those conversations and those conversations be meaningful. What also allowed to happen through those conversations and being able to provide support was being able to take the support that was given and coordinate with the schools. Seeing that this happened during spring break, we were able to coordinate with the schools to ensure that support was ongoing and it didn't just stop with us, right? So just like how Tammy said that there's point people and there is a member of the trauma team that's connected to each school, we were able to make sure that support continued. It also allowed us to have the conversation about providing added resources, which were made possible by our community partners. And I think we were able to just cover a lot of areas of need during that time.
I know Tammy said this earlier, but and you were kind of touching on it as well. But this trauma team, the response that the district has is it almost reminds me of sort of the state, federal level kind of thing, where you've got kids in schools, and this is a little unusual one too because of the spring break, and kids were all over the place, not necessarily in our community when things were happening, far, far away sometimes. But, typically you've got a school that can take care of kids as they see them and are interacting with them. And then this level, the district level, is sort of there to support and to backfill. And like Tammy said too, like if you have to pull resources from another place, because often, not usually is it impacting entire community at once. It might be really heavy at one school if a student passes away there or whatever. Kind of tell us a little bit more about how that typically looks and who's there to support them.
Well, we never really know until we're able to have these conversations about what the needs are. So we have luckily we have a really large list of different supports for families and things. So we have a lot to be able to pull from, but to be able to say what it is specifically for each family, those are the conversations that we're having with the students and families to know and identify what the needs are, so we know where to point them, so we can point them in the right direction if we can't do it within the schools. Excellent.
Thank you for adding that. We're going to talk about like the conversations that we're having in the hallways and that kind of stuff, but I also just wanted to just underline what I think it was Tammy that said, the idea of how this really impacts people. And I know I'm an unusual person. I came from TV news, but like it was bringing back memories from all these other events that had happened before, covering Columbine and the movie theater stuff and all these little moments, and then even to your family, it's like your grandmother and when that happened, and I mean it's it is crazy how it really is this this kind of moment. So with that in mind, you then have these kids that are, you know, in hallways, in classrooms, and I almost think about them almost like billiard balls, kind of, you know, this event happens and then they're just sort of, you know, ricocheting around the school, having their own individual situations and reacting because of those memories and those situations that they've had, but also then, you know, impacting each other, right? As they're talking to each other or their parents or whatever. Jamie, you know, talk about, you know, what kind of advice you guys have been giving schools and teachers as we've been trying to support these kids that are, I don't know if ricocheting is too strong of a word, but kind of moving around and interacting with each other.
Yeah, well, you know, we're really thoughtful about that. And actually, you brought up Columbine, and it made me think back to our original training for all of the folks on our trauma teams, is that we've all been trained by Prepare. And the first Prepare training I went to was given by the women who responded to Columbine, and all of the knowledge that they gained over the years. And so we're really trained from this model of very wise women and men who responded to traumatic events from the very start. So I think that's just something to point out for our team. But as far as kids being in the buildings, I know with our younger kids, we really wanted to be respectful that there were some families that didn't talk to their younger kids about this event because it might be too scary and the kids might not need to know about it. There are some kids who did know about the event and parents did speak to their kids about it. And, you know, what we recommend is obviously an age appropriate way of talking to them about it. And before kids return to schools, we ask parents of the younger kids, you know, like K through 5, to tell their kids to not be talking about it with other kids, because we didn't want other kids to get scared, and we didn't want misinformation being given to kids to, like, you know, really exasperate the situation for some. And we recommended that if kids did want to talk about it at school, that they contact a trusted adult, or some parents reached out to the counselors so the counselors would know to meet with that kid that day so they can talk about their thoughts and feelings and just ask questions that they have. I know with our younger kids, we really focus on making them feel safe when they come back to school, especially after a really scary event like this. And so with our younger kids, that's what we recommended. And as far as our older kids, you know, we know middle schoolers and high schoolers have access to more information. So having teachers talk about it in age appropriate ways, you know, listening. And for our team also decided there were some teachers that were really nervous about going back to school and having to have these conversations. So people were meeting with those teachers one-on-one. I know some of our team members helped teachers talk to kids or were in the classroom with them. So it was really, you know, a variety of ways, you know, and it also really depended on the community. Like Fairview was really close. So we, you know, Fairview had a moment of silence. They talked over the intercom about it. And I'm not quite sure about other high schools, what they did. So it really depended on the community as well.
And I think that's really important to say too, is that we really want to have, and I think we always talk about this in school communications, but you know, you don't want to have just one, you know, blanket rule that applies to everybody, because it is so different. You know, I think about, you know, to Fairview, where they lost a former student that was only a few years out from school. I mean, that's gonna feel different than maybe Bear Creek, where they also are impacted as a community. I mean, they're just down the street from that King Soopers, but maybe it isn't the same thing. And so, you know, giving some latitude, it's not like we're all in, we've got a kind of a playbook that we work from, but it's not like everything has to be lockstep from school to school. Everybody's able to kind of utilize some of their knowledge and their expertise, right?
Exactly. And we really want to focus on healing when we come back from any event, but in this event particularly, we want kids to feel connected. We want kids to feel safe, and that's for all grade levels. You know, we want them to come back and feel like they have their needs met, that they feel safe at school. And I got to be at Fairview when we returned to school, and the kids were doing a great job of just being students together and supporting each other and talking to adults when they needed it. So it was wonderful to see them come back and support each other.
I think this kind of ties to it, the idea that, our students, some of them may be very much like, okay, I need help. You might catch them crying in the hallway or really having a difficult time and talking to their friends about it. You can catch that conversation and pull them in. But a lot of times we know that there are kids that don't exhibit anything, or at least they're not raising their hand about it. What should we be looking for, and what's the best course of action for a teacher or an employee that might see that?
Randy, it all depends on the student. I think one of the things we have to be looking at with the younger students in elementary is they're going to get their physical signs, the tummy ache, the headache. So I would love the nurses to really be paying attention and not think it's COVID related, because those are the symptoms. It could be that anxiety that's manifesting in that way. Lack of concentration in the classroom, where they are out, they're present, but they're not really present in the moment, paying attention to the teacher and what she's presenting. So difficulty concentrating, being jumpy, just jumpy for no reason. Also fatigue is another one. Sleepy, because they're not having a good night's sleep at home because they potentially are scared, anxious. So they're going to come home, to school sleepy, fatigue, not really wanting to eat. If they were good eaters and they ate their snacks during school, now they're like, no, I don't want to eat, or I'm not hungry. And teachers know their students best. So if they see any change in their social, emotional, those are some big signs that they could tell the kids, hey, let's go talk to your school counselor. Tell me what's going on. Just open-ended question. How are you doing? And hopefully they have that relationship with the child, with that student, that they're going to open up about how they're feeling.
Perfect. Jamie, at the middle school or high school level, does that look any differently? I can imagine some of those things. Again, we typically say, I know that with suicide prevention tips, it's that change in attitude and that demeanor that really is one of the big signs that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they might, like our high schoolers just might not come to school and say they don't feel well, right? And they might be a little bit more, I think sometimes people think that it's just sadness, but we might see students be more angry, more frustrated, more irritated, more agitated. And that's just another form that it can look. And I think same thing, like they're not eating, maybe they're not hanging out with their friends, they're not going to soccer practice, they're not going to their club after school, maybe they're, just not really reaching out to their friends as much, not getting their homework done. I think same sort of things, but it just looks different as they get a little older, Yeah.
Sarah, I saw you shaking your head too, sort of in agreement. Anything that you want to add?
Well, I would say with the older kids, I think all of that is right on. I think with the older kids, other things to look for might be, increased risk-taking behaviors or substance drug abuse, things like that, kind of wanting to escape, might be happening.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not excellent that that's happening, obviously, but I was actually on my way to work this morning early. I was listening to NPR, and they had a story about the pandemic and how there's a huge concern about kids, that they're coming back to school, obviously, with a lot of mental trauma as well, and that was kind of the area that they were talking about as well with high schoolers, and either risk factors, or maybe they're trying to sort of signal that they need a little bit more help. It's kind of a call for help sometimes when the kid's doing something that's kind of out of the normal league of what they typically do too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Why don't I go to, another question that we had was just the idea of, that it's not all over. The news coverage continues. We're going to continue to see these developments about, why the heck did this person do this? I know I saw a story over the weekend, and if there's a trial, which we would fully expect, it's just going to continue to sort of linger and these little developments and these little trigger points. I mean, again, I think Tammy, you were kind of talking about, that typically we in our own lives, and I was mentioning like my grandmother or whatever, like, deaths that have happened in our lives, we go back to it, as this happens, as they talk about, as they show more video of the memorial, it's just going to continue to bring people back to the same place, right?
Correct. And I think the important thing with this response and this tragedy is that this isn't a sprint, this is a marathon. And we really are in a space and will be in a space for quite a while in our community of healing. And there might be moments along the way where you think, we're doing well, or the kids are doing well, and something might trigger, these feelings and bring us right back to where we are. And so I think it's important for all of us, the teachers and adults included, to reach out for help if you need that, or reach out to someone that, that trusted friend of yours if you need to talk, and work through those feelings and be there for your students if they're feeling that way as well. And so I think, that's where our layers of support come in, within our buildings, there are, at the elementary, we've got our mental health advocates. They're always willing to be that, listening ear. We have prevention interventionists at our secondary levels. We've got school counselors at all levels. Our social workers and psychs are, part of our trauma teams as well. And they're always that listening ear. But as employees, we have our EAP resource that we can use, and we now have 8 sessions. And so we're all aware of how to access those. And so maybe that's just, you just need to go to somebody to ask, how do I access my EAP supports? And if you are coming across barriers in that space, reach back out to us. And I know Jeannie Aguilar has worked really hard in HR in this, and she wants to know, and she'll help if you're finding roadblocks and barriers into getting access for those mental health sessions, or just any of that. I think it's just us being a community and looking out for each other. And maybe you see a colleague that's really struggling, but they're not speaking up. And, oftentimes we don't speak up, but, reach out and say, hey, I see that this has been more challenging, or that's been more challenging. And all those behaviors that we were talking about with our students, our adults also can go to those same coping behaviors for themselves, depending on however they are. And that's it. This trauma there's not a magic script that we can give anybody. There's not a magic, there's not medicine to make it all better and go away. And so it's really just all of us wrapping our arms around each other and understanding that we're all going to process this differently. And some of us within our community might not have any reaction to this, and that's perfectly okay. They might not be connected to that King Soopers. They might not know anybody that was there, and they're working through just trying to heal from our own pandemic that we've had for the last year. This is another layer on top of already stressed environment that we've been in, and trying to keep ourselves healthy and safe. And this is just another thing that we're dealing with within our country that a lot of people are questioning, why does this happen? And so really us just being there for each other and accessing the supports. Our community mental health partners, Sarah's going to talk a bit about what they have done to set up supports for our community. They've done a tremendous job. The FBI has also worked with our community partners to set up resources. I just had the district attorney's office reach out to me on Friday. And unfortunately, we've had many events happen within our own state of Colorado. And I would say that, we have those point of contacts now. We've been in communication with them. I've met with them several different times, and we are all trained to prepare, and they are the ones reminding me of, this, that, and they're there for us as well. So reaching out for support, I think, is the biggest piece in working through this long haul that we're in.
And I do want to recognize exactly what you're saying, which is, it's amazing that the community of support that's out there, former principal, Columbine principal, Frank DeAngelis, actually reached out to the school district. I know that we were in touch with a lot of folks that we've worked with in the past on things like that. It is amazing the outpouring of support that a school district gets when they go through something like this. And I do want to mention, we did get a question from a teacher too, which, this is it will seem like a tangent for a half second, but a couple weekends ago, I was watching World Trade Center, and you see these little images of 9/11 or these events that have happened in our past, and it automatically does transport you back. And so I do want to ask a question that we got from a teacher over at Columbine. He said, I responded to a scene as a victims advocate. They're trained for trauma. They've been, this person's been on the job for 21 years. However, since the shooting, she's experiencing sudden episodes of anxiety. That she is handling well, but her question is, how can I prevent those horrible images from surfacing on their own and unexpectedly? And she thanked us for the space. Again, mentioning the 9/11 thing or whatever, it is uncanny that when you see an image of something that you recognize, or Laura Schaefer, the superintendent and board secretary, also was just mentioning that just walking into the supermarket these days, because they've got, signs up, or, obviously it was at a King Soopers, so you naturally saw images of a King Soopers at that point in trauma. That is a scary thing. How do people deal with that? Anybody willing to kind of talk about how to handle that?
I can talk a little bit about it. I think that's like you were saying, I think it's pretty normal and typical when you have had a past event and it's been traumatic for those feelings and experiences to come back. So some of that is normal, right? And just sort of expecting that might happen for a period of time, and then if it really continues, I think then really reaching out for support. There are certain kinds of therapies. EMDR is really good for working with those past kind of images. I think knowing yourself really well, maybe limiting media exposure is really important. If you know your triggers, kind of really attending to that during times like this, and basic self-care, eating, sleeping, exercising, going back to the things that help you. It's there is no way to control what's coming. It comes, and right, I think you can't force yourself to not have that imagery. So really also stepping in and getting what you need to get to help yourself with it.
I think those are really great tips. And, I will mention too that, that saying of like, you can't unsee things sometimes.
Right.
I know my wife had spoken about that. There was that viral video that had come out with the person that was walking into the store. There's no reason to watch that. I'll just say that out loud. And she was having trouble for a few days after that because, the things that she saw that she couldn't really unsee at that point. So, yeah, I don't want to give a plug for something that.
Right. Yeah, I've been telling parents of middle schoolers and high schoolers to have those conversations with their kids about that specific video. And that other thing I would add is, sometimes if you know that those are things that are happening for you, like images coming up, to really practice some grounding techniques before going to work or throughout the day. Sometimes kids will just get anxious during the day, and I'll talk to them about, and this would work for adults too, is just to kind of to check in with yourself and notice like, okay, I'm at school, I'm safe right now, I'm okay, take some deep breaths. And some grounding techniques could be maybe yoga in the morning, or a walk, or sitting in meditation, reading a book at night before you go to bed. And I would agree with Sarah about watching your media exposure. And I also would add, like, don't watch any shows that are violent. Like I really stick to the comedy genre when things like this are going on, even you know, just because as being on the trauma response team, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to watch funny, humorous shows right now. So just those sort of practices that can help you just feel a little bit more grounded, feel a little bit more in control, and just reminding yourself that you're okay if you are in fact okay, right?
Right. And it's what you can control. I mean, you can't control the world around you, but, you know, at least the items that you can. And, you know, I think that really, you know, is a good segue to, you know, we, in this show previously, we've talked about RISE, you know, which is a program that we're doing through, I think it's Kaiser Permanente. Is that right, Elton? I see him shaking his head. This is really the analogy that we always use is the idea of, you know, if you're on a plane, they always tell you to put your oxygen mask on first, because you can't take care of others if you're incapacitated. I think Jamie just said, you know, exactly what we would say too, which is, you know, are you okay? You know, you may be really struggling with this and may not be in a place where you can take care of others. And so that's, you know, we want to be cognizant of that. But Elton, there are some things that staff could and should do about taking care of themselves first, right?
Definitely. RISE is an acronym for Resilience in Schools and Educators. And it's a resiliency program that really promotes cultivating adult well-being. And I think one of the things we really have to realize, especially now, is this is just another, although very tragic, it's a tragedy on top of one that we've already been dealing with. So more now than ever, we have to think about and maintain our self-care rituals and routines, whatever those may be. Jamie just mentioned some, Sarah just mentioned some, but they're very important right now, and they can't be overlooked. We have to make sure that we are taking care and prioritizing our own emotional needs. And yes, it is like the message when you get on a plane in terms of putting the mask on yourself before you help someone else. We really have to make sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can to take care of ourselves, because we're in the business of actually taking care of others. And there's no way that we can do that effectively if we're not taking care of ourselves. So grounding ourselves, making sure that we're okay. And if we notice that we aren't okay, really finding those supports to get to the point of being okay before we look at taking care of others. It's our job, so it's easy to try and kind of get swallowed up in that, but especially in times like this. But right now, we got to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and doing what we can for ourselves before we look at helping others.
We always talk about that peak. I can't remember what, there's like I think a name for it, right? But what, you know, depending on where that water level is, you know, you're somewhere on that peak, and if you're way up here, you have very little amount of space to deal with the stresses in your life, and then you're in sort of that acute, like, need help kind of range. And so that ability to get sleep and exercise and all those, it sounds so basic, but it's so true. I know when I'm overworked and all that kind of stuff, man, your fuse is a whole lot shorter, right? Other, you know, again, just that breathing or anything else, Elton, from your point of view that you'd want to share in terms of tips?
Really, it's whatever works for you, and really identifying those things that may work for you, whether it is reading a book, whether it is meditation, whether it is kind of talking to other people to kind of just get things out and allow you to relax a little bit more. Those are all things that are useful, but it's to each individual person, right? For me, I work out multiple times a day. It makes me feel good. It allows me to get some things out that may be kind of a little stressful. I try not to let stress win, but I try and do what I can. But for whoever else, it works for each individual different. Right. And you got to really take that to heart and find out what those things are that will allow you to ground yourself and feel good about what's happening throughout the day so we can take care of others.
Elton, I'm sorry, Randy. A lot in the RISE space, they talk about hand to heart. Can you talk through that, because that's a really quick, simple thing that we could pass along to all educators, because it's a really easy grounding piece.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Is I saw you over there doing the hand of the heart, which
I
by
try
the way,
not to boss them around, but sometimes I have to.
before Elton answers, I do want to say I need his workout regimen. It looks like he takes care of himself there. So whatever he's doing, he's doing it right.
I try. I can still do a little bit better, but definitely the hand to heart is a really big part of Rise, and it's again it's a grounding exercise that that centers yourself. So you put your hand on your chest and you concentrate on where you're at, the environment that you're in, and the supports and resources that are around you, and really breathe through, taking deep breaths and breathe through that thought process, and really centering yourself so you can feel good about where you're at in the environment that we're in. So it takes just a little bit of time to do that. It's similar to meditation and things like that. So I encourage people to really use that when they have the opportunity, and that can happen multiple times a day, not just like in the morning or before you go to bed or anything like that. It can happen multiple times a day before you have that tough conversation that you know is coming. You can just put your hand on the heart and really think about what's happening and ground yourself before you get into those things. And it really brings your levels down and allows you to open up.
Very cool. Very cool. And I think, and Yada, you've said that before too with kids. It's that idea of just, throughout the day, just, having these little moments where by working that into your, it doesn't have to be like just when you're in crisis, that if you're doing that on a normal basis, then that's very helpful, right?
Absolutely. And especially with kids, one of the words I used, I'm here and I'm safe right now, that really hits home for them, that whatever space they're in, they're safe. And I use that with some of my teachers as well. But one of the things I want to say is that as adults, sometimes we carry this guilt of, I'm not doing enough, or I should have done this. And I know I sometimes do that, but we have to give ourselves permission to have fun, to laugh, enjoy the things that we like to do. When we start doing that, we start the healing process. And the healing process is so important for us in our self-care. So giving yourself permission every day to do something you love is so important. I myself, I don't exercise 3 times a day like Elton does, but I love to cook. So for me, my healing process is cooking. My healing process is having those family times. So, and those laughs at the end of the day. So give yourself that grace that you are able to laugh, that you are able to have fun, because that's how healing's going to start. And that's how healing's going to start in our community as well. So find a funny book, find a comedy, something that you like, so that when we start producing that laughter, it helps us with the healing. It helps reduce that stress level as well.
Awesome. Sarah, I know that this tragedy has really impacted wider than just the schools. It's something that's impacting every community member to a certain extent. But also, this is a time in which you see community organizations like your own partner with, the school district to help kids. I mean, talk about kind of what the efforts that you guys have taken on to support, employees, parents, students, et cetera.
Yeah, well, I think that one thing that's been really heartening about this is the incredible response, community response, and the capacity of a lot of different agencies and people to come together. We are going through this as a community, so that's been wonderful to see. In terms of mental health partners, we have been in conversations with many organizations. Currently, many of you probably know that Kroger, King, who is King Soopers essentially, wanted to set up a center for the employees and family members of victims. And so that currently is called the Resource Center, and it's set up at the Chase Bank, on the top floor of the Chase Bank, which is on the corner of Table Mesa and Broadway. And that has been, so that's there, and there are a number of different agencies. Mental Health Partners is there to help people with mental health support. The Red Cross is there. COVA is there. Colorado Organization for Victims Assistance, the Red Cross, the Kroger HR. They also have Hope Coalition is there with therapy dogs, and an acupuncturist is there, massage therapist. So it's a place for people. So I would encourage you, as working in the schools, if you hear either for yourselves or families that have been affected by this more closely. So originally it was set up specifically for employees and family members. They're sort of broadening it. So the support is if, you really are more in the local area or just were affected, it's fine to go there and get supports. Mental Health Partners is offering free therapy for 4 months to people who, again, family members, people who are in the store, people who are nearby. And the way to access that, you can either go to the Resource Center. If you're a school person and you don't know how to get that, you could contact Tammy and reach out to me, and I can help you get linked to that. You can also call the main mental health number, and there is a special prompt for the Table Mesa event, and they will help you to get the services. So those are primarily, I also know that we have been working with other Aurora Mental Health, Jefferson Mental Health, other communities to help provide some mental health support, because there are, it's hard to find particularly adolescent and child therapists. So we're really extending the reach, and they are, and helping with the support.
Excellent. And Tammy, I think this ties into the whole picture of, what we normally talk about with the generalized support for students, and then you've got, more acute, there's sort of a layer, and then obviously we don't do everything as a school district. I mean, having that community partnership and getting students to a place where they can get this deeper help is part of the picture, right? It's the whole spectrum, right?
Absolutely. So each of our buildings have our school counselors. And like I said, we have our mental health advocates and a prevention interventionist. And so really reaching out to those folks, if you've got a student that is in need, they know how to connect them with our community resources, because we're an educational setting, and we don't have all of that to do in-house. And so all of those folks work closely with that student's parents, and then we connect them with outside resources and getting them the supports and help that they need. I think for our adults in our system right now too, we're partnering with Mental Health Partners, and we'll be having a course that you guys can take, a professional development opportunity, and that's normal reactions to abnormal circumstances. So mark your calendars. We'll have that April 15th. They'll be, and 29th, April 15th and 29th. And they're offered from 3:30 to 5 on both of those evenings. We also have other resources for adults as well. So it's really that layered support and trying to get, the whole system covered, from our students all the way to our adults.
And again, a lot of these resources are in your email. If you've seen recently that those 2 dates are in there. We want to save the calendar. I know we'll have more in regards to the linkage and how to register or whatever, those kind of things coming up. But also just hotlines, and all you have to do is kind of go back into your email a little bit, and we've got resources that are there. We've also built a page on the staff.bvsd.org website that has the EAP connections. So you I can't remember how many. I think it's 6 I don't want to get misquoted here, six free sessions with them to start off?
It's 8. We used to have 6,
Okay.
and Jeannie was able to work that through, that we have 8 now. And so,
Awesome.
that's a really good amount of time to work through things. And so you have 8 sessions.
Awesome. Perfect. So there is just a lot of resource here to support. I do want to hit, as I mentioned before, that, it's come up a couple of times that this is like a disaster inside of a disaster, or a tragedy inside of a tragedy kind of thing, like pandemic and all these things. It's just, it just has not stopped this last, year and a half. As we look at, and we had this really eye-opening Board of Education presentation a couple of weeks ago, back in, I think, really January, where Boulder County Public Health really laid out some of the mental health numbers and what they're seeing in the spike. And I know that we just even heard from them recently about the number of attempted suicides. This is all very concerning. This time of year, as I know we've talked about before, it's definitely, thankfully, we're starting to get to the lighter days of the year, but in the darker days, it's very tough. It's still pretty tough in the springtime when it comes to students and suicide. Tammy, when you want to kind of kick this off in regards to, there is so much stuff that we have to kind of consider right now with students and supporting them. And again, this is the tragedy that just happened is one more layer on top of, some other things that have been going on for some time.
Right. And so you're right, Randy, I think, and Sarah can talk a little bit more about it too, but our outside centers, emergency rooms, and our locations where, you can do the walk-in mental health. I'm totally drawing blank on exactly what the name of the center is, but they've seen an increase, a drastic increase of folks coming in that need support for anything with thoughts of suicide. And so they did have a presentation to our board a few weeks back, and we've been talking about it as community partners. And so from the school level, all of our mental health people in that space have been trained in how to support them. And we're looking at putting another few layers of support and training in there for all of our educators. And that's really just understanding, identifying, and helping people get the resources that they need. And so we are working to build those out for next year. And that's a QPR training or CIS training, and just really getting our entire system equipped for identifying students in need or adults in need, and then the ability to provide them the resources that they need to get the help that they need. And we lost our eyes on students, right? When we all went home and we started learning behind a computer, we weren't able to have our eyes on them or our adults. And so we have seen those increases, and it's a worrisome issue that we have right now. And I think that we're really partnering. We were going to have actually last week, we were going to have a meeting to get this all set up. And we just talked about it on Friday with MHP and us. And also RISE is an organization that we partner with that helps provide resources for families that need that, that counseling support for their students. And so we're going to really work together, and knowing that when we come back in the fall, we want to have a really good support system for all of our students. And not saying that we're not doing that now, we are, but we know that we really need to get all of us equipped to have this conversation about how do we support our students and our adults in this space of suicide. And Sarah, you can talk a little more about what MHP has been doing in this space as well.
Yeah. And I think one simple thing I would say, simple but not so simple for teachers and people who are working in the schools, that, leaning into the conversation, not being afraid to ask, the question, and then getting the student, if a student is presenting as more depressed or saying things like, oh, I just don't feel like being here anymore, to really stop and have a short conversation, and then get them to the PI or the counselor who can then get them support. That's the main thing, that, it's not necessarily your responsibility to help them through the whole thing, but not to shy away when you're seeing something. And I generally think teachers and people working in the schools are wonderful about that, but that's really important, is to just lean into it. So there are, I actually heard this morning, and I don't know that Jared Polis actually is putting with the stimulus money, wants to really focus on offering more supports to specifically this issue. Kids who are struggling, who are more have suicidal ideation or anxiety and depression. So hopefully that'll manifest somehow. In terms of mental health partners, the clinicians are all trained in assist training, which is applied. It's a kind of suicide intervention. We also are trained in CAMS, which again is another suicide. It's a really way to work at what are the underlying causes, motivators for suicide. So there's a lot of training that the clinicians have, as well as we can help partner and offer to the community. Like Tammy was saying, QPR, Safe Talk, Assist. So there are many trainings that if one wanted to attend, you can look on our website, and they're offered periodically. We also partner with you guys to try to offer some of those trainings, make it user-friendly for you. So there is a lot of attention. We have a person at our agency who really is overseeing the whole Zero Suicide Initiative, and kind of the expert, and making sure that all mental health partners is trained, and then trying to extend that out to the community.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much for all that you guys are doing in that regard. I do want to notice that we're getting close on the clock here, so I do want to give everybody a quick second. If we haven't talked about something that's really important to you, or have a last thought, you guys are welcome to say that. And why don't I go in reverse order? Sarah, do you have anything that you would want to say?
I think one thing I would say, and I think Yadi was talking about, and we were talking about teachers and adults and self-care, the importance of that. It's also really great modeling for youth and kids, that I think you can feel like I need to kind of hold it together, and, but also modeling self-care, taking a moment, to take some deep breaths or hand to heart, that is a way to say it's okay, and model that, we're not always doing okay, and there's things you can do. So I would encourage you to be authentic and know that it's okay to take care of yourself and model that.
Thank you, Sarah. Yadi.
I would just want to say, to let teachers know that there's a village behind them, and there's a community of student supports within our district that is there to support them and never to feel alone in what they're experiencing. So reach out to one of us, that we're here to support you, and we could guide you in whatever resource you're wanting or needing. And just remember, when you speak to one of us, it's confidential. So our conversations are confidential, and I think that's very important for staff to know, so that they could feel more comfortable talking about how they're really feeling. So reach out, and you've got a village behind you that's here to support you.
Awesome. Thank you, Yadi. Jamie.
I would agree with what Yadi just said. I've been thinking about how it's really okay. We have all these resources listed in emails, but sometimes if people are really overwhelmed or dealing with some big feelings and emotions, they might feel paralyzed to really go through the emails and actually access the resources. And our team, like Yadi said, we're all here to help. And I mean, I know that everyone on our team has sat with a staff member in the past and walked through EAP, has called EAP with them. Like, we will sit with you and help make it happen if anyone needs help. And for our students, and if there's anything concerning and you have questions and you're not sure, reach out to one of us as well. We're here to help, as we just want the best for our students and our staff. Thanks for having me, Randy.
Oh, of course. Thanks for being here. Elton.
I would say just as we want our employees and staff to take care of themselves, we also have to recognize that our parents have to do it as well. Don't be worried or feel like you're being too overboard in terms of asking for support yourselves, as well as being okay with if you just notice things that aren't looking right or feeling right, getting support with that, whether it's yourself or your student as well. So we would rather be more safe than sorry in any situation. So I would just mention that.
Awesome. Thank you, Elton. And finally, Tammy.
Yeah, I do appreciate you, Randy, for having this opportunity for us to come in here and share what we're doing. And I would just say if the community needs anything, to reach out to us, and we will try our best to meet that need. And if we can't meet that need, then we'll point them in the right direction to somebody that can support them. And so, yeah, it's a village, and we're all here to support, and we are wanting that you all to feel that we're here to support them. So we're in this together. So just reach out.
Well, I really appreciate all of you guys joining us today, and also just that sentiment of, you don't have to feel guilty for needing help or raising your hand and saying, hey, I'm needing a little extra, support or an arm around the shoulder or whatever right now. I think all of us, have those moments and need that. So I just want to reiterate that. We did get a question right here at the end in regards to, is there a centralized place? I would say for the hotlines and the support that's available in this field, the trauma and grief page on the district website is the best go-to place for that resources, and it's open to everybody. We do have a small resource bank right at the top of the staff website, staff.bvsd.org right now in relation to the shooting, and we'll try to carry a little bit more from the emails into there and make sure that those dates for the upcoming events are there as well. But just want to recognize all that. And then finally, we do have another show that's planned on Thursday, and it's for parents. It'll be our Let's Talk Education show on this very topic. And so if you know parents, that are struggling with this and have questions just like I know that our staff have, don't hesitate to let them know that is coming up on Thursday. I think it's at 4 o'clock, but we'll be putting out some information today or tomorrow about that as well. So again, thank you to our panel for joining us today. You guys are amazing. And thank you all for joining us out there. I hope that you guys have a great week. Thanks.